I'm Lo Silva, and today with me I have an awesome guest, someone who I'm really looking forward to have a conversation with, Mr. Rob Walling of Startups from the Rest of Us, and also of Get Drip and a lot of other things. So before I, you know, butcher it, Rob, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit of a better bio than what I did?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks a lot for having me on the show, Los. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Likewise.
Yeah, so my background is in software development, but these days I run a small software company where I'm the fifth employee. I guess I was the first, but we have five employees, and I have a software side where I have GetDrip.com, which is like email marketing software. It's actually more marketing automation software these days. It's just
Okay.
moving into Infusionsoft area, and then HitTail, which is a long tail SEO keyword tool
Hmm.
and a few other small products. And then I have an educational side, which is where, you mentioned Startups for the Rest of Us, my podcast. I have a book called Start Small, Stay Small, and I run a conference called MicroConf. And so those are kind of the two sides that one brings me, I make the bulk of my income from software, and then I have the bulk of my fun teaching and hanging out with other entrepreneurs.
Yeah, yeah, there's definitely a nice mix on there. I do a lot of the same similar stuff. We
Sure,
have a few smaller web apps, and we also do the teaching and things like that, and try to give as much value as we can with the
exactly.
podcast and just all our content. So we decided today that we were going to kind of just free flow it and talk a little bit about some bottlenecks that are going on in the business as bootstrappers and stuff like that. So I know you mentioned that you guys are kind of expanding and growing and getting into hiring, right?
That's right.
So what are some bottlenecks that you're having with the whole hiring process right now?
Yeah, what's interesting is I started off as a developer. I'm more of an introvert than an extrovert, and I've always kind of liked working alone. And so I set out to basically build a software company that I could just exist on and that would provide income for me, and I would never have to hire anyone because I didn't want to deal with the headache of employees. And I put headache in quotes because it was a perceived headache, right? I worked at a credit card company and a bunch of other places where it's like you don't like your coworkers because you didn't get to
Yeah.
pick them. You didn't get to hand choose them, right?
There's no connection there. You're just working at the same place.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So I did that for many years, and eventually it got to the point where um, the business was doing really well. I had nine contractors working for me around the world. A couple of them were full time, but most of them were part time, just handling a bunch of stuff. And it just hit the point where I was like, you know what? Since I don't have a co-founder, it would be awesome to have kind of that employee number one who I could really, uh, I don't know, really kind of confide in and have some good conversations with. Not quite founder level conversations, but similar type stuff. In
Hmm.
addition, finding someone who's going to stick around for the long haul because contractors do turn over every couple of years. So that was a big decision point for me. I mean, I've been this single founder guy for years. That the kind of the solopreneur software advocate, I guess. And so I decided last year to start hiring. So there's now five of us, and I'm moving from a worldwide basis of contractors to like a more local group of folks. And so most of us are within 30 miles of each other. And yeah, boy, there's some complexities. There's some pluses and minuses to it. I think there's more pluses though, the further I get into it. Like if you hire really carefully and you hire for I'm hiring less for technical and more for like personality fit and culture
Hmm.
fit. And even at only five employees, there's like what's funny is the culture is really what I decided to be, right? Because it's me
Yeah.
and three other dudes, right? So it's like it's not any like culture document we have, but it's like I think that's the biggest thing that I'm adjusting to is you get to handpick your people, so handpick them really, really carefully.
Yeah, I think everyone for the most part, unless you are VC backed and things like that, kind of starts off saying, "Hey, I got a developer in Romania, and then I've got a designer in India, and then
That's right.
we're just kind of going that way, kind of we're all figuring it out, right? And then
Yep.
as things start to get a little bit more serious, a little bit more moving forward, and you kind of look at different points of scale and what your bottlenecks seem to be, it turns out that a lot of those bottlenecks sometimes happen because you're in one time zone, someone else is in another time zone. There's actual problems that need to be resolved right now. We don't know how to get in contact, and so I totally feel you on kind of connecting with a more local based, even 30 miles, because you're just
Yeah.
you're just a quick drive. You could potentially have an office as well.
Which we do, yeah, and we kind of all
Yeah.
meet. We meet there 3 days a week typically, but it's. I like to think of it as leveling up. I'm glad you brought up the point of kind of when you're starting out, you really don't have any money, right? If you're not
Hmm.
venture backed, and so
Yeah.
you have to hire. I mean, I hired a $4 virtual assistant when I started because I just didn't have any money, and I hired $10 software developers. You're not going to get the best at that point, but it'll get you to it can get you to the point of profitability, right? Of at least being able to lower your consulting or quit consulting or leave your salary gig, which is what it did for me, right? It enabled
Hmm.
that. But now that I'm at the point where the business has grown and there is budget, I've realized there's a leveling up, and leveling up is like going more local, and it's hiring better people, and they are a little more expensive, but it's amazing. I don't think I could grow to a seven-figure business if I had contractors. I shouldn't say I couldn't. It would be really hard, and it would be just with the turnover and the inability to meet in the same room. There's a lot of limiting factors there.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think you could, but the again, the bottlenecks would always be the same one. So scaling and systemizing your business is a lot easier when everybody's there, and then building that culture, like you talked about, is just it's something that at the end of the day, I think everyone in some sort of way. I was just having this conversation with my friend Scott, and it's something you crave because you are building. You are kind of like a loner and things like that, and you're kind of by yourself, or you have this remote team. But when you're in an environment where everyone can kind of like create, be friends, connect, share, help, more happens, and you're all kind of like happy to be pushing this thing forward. And I think that's powerful overall for any kind of culture.
Yeah, I agree. And I think in those early days, if you're bootstrapping and you're in your first year, I think that hiring someone full time or trying to go local would be too difficult, both financially and just mentally. I wasn't prepared for it. I was too focused on building a product and marketing, and it really helped that I was in fact alone because all I thought about and all I worked on was getting that product and getting to the point of where I could quit consulting, basically. But and I think it does depend on your personality. I do know some software developers who 10 years later are still working solo, and still have their business. For me, I worked at home for 10 years, it does get old for some people. You kind of just want to change. And so I don't think everyone has to do that. I certainly don't. I think you can grow a SaaS business. I know several people who've done it without employees. I've done it to this point without employees, and I've had very successful businesses. But there comes a decision point really where you think, do I want to do this or not? And so I think it's definitely what I found is it's a very viable move to start hiring, and it hasn't ruined my fun like I thought it would. I thought I'd be weighed down with personnel issues, and like being an HR rep and like vacation time and whatever else, benefits and stuff. And I've spent very little time on them. I've been deliberate about just saying, here's the deal. If you need vacation, take vacation. I'm not going to count the days. If you're sick, don't come to work, or work at home. I mean, that's the team we
The
built. There's
culture.
only, yeah, right. It's the four
Yeah.
of us, and so I don't know. It's been. I know this won't scale. My attitude and the way I'm running this won't scale to 20 employees. I know that. I know you have to have more processes, but I haven't made that. I don't think I'm ever going to scale to 20 employees. At least at this point, I don't. I don't want to do that. So.
Yeah, no, I get you, and it's cool to have that whole, hey, you're not producing today, just leave.
Yep.
Let's be realistic about things, and a lot of times, that's what people crave. They crave that kind of like new environment and getting inside of that. So you just said you made four new hires because you're employee number five. So who do you have on your team right now?
Yeah. So what's a trip is that of the four, two of them I've worked with for years, but they were contractors.
Hmm.
And so one guy is still a contractor because he's overseas. He's been my support guy for like 4 years. He's a virtual assistant, but now he's much more than that. He's like a part of the team. So he's not technically W-2, but he's essentially full time, right? So I just moved him up to full time, and that's a no-brainer. I mean, he does front end email support for most of my products and does a great job of it, helps people get onboarded. He'll dig into the product and really understand it and help them install JavaScript snippets. I mean, really goes above and beyond. Um, then I have about 2.5 developers after that. So my fourth guy really isn't full time yet, but I hope to move him up there in a couple months. And they're all software guys. And then I am basically the marketer. I mean, I'm the vision guy trying to push it forward, but I'm also the one who's working on all the copy and getting the word out and running advertising and working with. I do still work with contractors who help with ads, and I do still have a couple designer contractors and that kind of stuff. But really, I brought my development in house because as a software company with now 2 SaaS apps. Um, there's just a lot of code to write, and I like having that knowledge, trying to keep that knowledge in house, and frankly, having it local is an even more benefit.
Yeah. So what are you guys doing right now on both the SaaS apps as far as marketing and growth? What are you focusing on?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a SaaS app of these size of the size of Hittail and Drip, which is um, I'll say they're both 6-figure apps, so they're not doing neither of them is doing 7 figures. They of this size, paid acquisition is really the thing that I recommend people hit early on. I mean, SEO is big, that's a no-brainer, and then paid acquisition is the next thing I recommend people try. That's what I'm doing a lot of. Retargeting is like the no-brainer thing. If you're not doing retargeting, that is the most benefit you'll get out of your advertising dollar.
Especially if you're doing paid, you gotta
Yep, it is. Absolutely. And personally, I recommend Perfect Audience if someone's looking. I've tried 3 different services, and they not only work the best for me, but they're on it. Like they're moving fast. They're a startup, and they hustle. So they reply at midnight when I email them, and it's cool to see them doing. They're basically one of us. They're just bigger, right? They went through Y
yeah,
Combinator, and
yeah.
so you kind of feel like you get to know the guys. That's a no-brainer, and I spend a lot of time working and honing and creating a lot of ads and testing them through Perfect Audience. And then, of course, it depends on your lifetime value, but LinkedIn ads are decent if you're B2B audience and your lifetime value supports it, because they're about $2 a click, which means you're
Yeah.
going to want a lifetime value of you need probably at least $200 to $300 lifetime value in order to think about LinkedIn ads. Um, and then Facebook ads are a nice one. You can get stuff in the 50 to 70 cents a click pretty easily and sustainably. And so you can have a lifetime value in the 150, probably 150 and up is where you can do that. AdWords is tough. The price keeps going up. Google's really smart and they make a lot of money, and therefore it's harder for us to, all the funded companies use it, and it's the easy way to go, but I haven't been able to get it to work in a couple of years, to be honest.
Yeah, right now, Facebook. I know a lot of people are actually trying Twitter. I
Yep.
work with a company called DriftRock, who just created a Twitter tool for targeting and using Twitter cards. So
Really?
that's
Oh,
really
that's cool.
interesting.
Yeah, I've just gotten into that in the last month. There's Twitter retargeting now. There's
Yeah,
Twitter, paid sponsor posts and all that stuff. I'm only maybe $500 into it, so I don't have any wisdom or insight to share, and it's not positive ROI for me now yet. But definitely trying to figure out, because it's those early networks that's where you get the cheap clicks.
yeah,
10 years ago or 7 years ago, AdWords was 5-10 cents a click, and now it's, depending on your niche, $5 to $50 a click.
yeah.
And then Facebook used to be, I used to be able to get 20-cent clicks on Facebook, and now it's like 50, 60, 70 as more people hear about it. But Twitter now should be that low cost one for the time being. If you get in there early, it's the Wild West, the tools aren't great. That's where you can do some arbitrage.
The thing about Twitter though that I think, because you have to like vary it on attention span. So like with Facebook, I'm more likely on my computer and I'm more likely going to click on something, and sure, you can either keep me on Facebook, you can take me away, but like my attention span's a little bit longer. And if you're on Twitter, most of the time you're going to be on phone and your attention span is just move it forward, move it
Flipping,
forward. So
flipping, right?
I think though, because of the way that people think mentally on Twitter, that you need to focus on kind of like creating a native ad strategy first, take them to content and have that content go through into some sort of onboarding sequence for you.
I could see that, right? Rather than asking for the sale up front, like you can feasibly do with a Facebook ad.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think you can ask for the sale, but I think it's trickier. I think overall, you just want to like really blow up your engagement and
Hmm.
audience on Twitter and just take them to native ads, give them some content marketing and kind of like tie that in. We're starting to test that out, and we're also kind of testing the same thing out on various different things with Facebook, just kind of like doing instead of right hand side, just doing newsfeed ads, but
Hmm.
the ad is basically just free content and kind of like
Yep.
taking you in and different
Right.
things like that.
That seems to be a good. I've heard that strategy also works really well on LinkedIn, where it's basically just giving away a white paper or a report or an ebook or whatever, and you're just trying to get the opt-in, right? You're trying to get them into that drip marketing sequence, where you're educating them and starting to build a relationship with them over a course of emails.
Yeah, LinkedIn, I would personally kind of be a little bit more afraid of just because you really have to know your numbers
Mm,
and you've got to have some sort of a sales team
mm.
because you are taking them through and you're going B2B. And so like, there's a longer sales cycle there. And so like the way that one would work, I think is a little bit longer tail than just kind of like the immediacy of what Facebook can do right now.
There are niches in LinkedIn or interests, I guess they're called, that are less like the internet marketing and the SEO and those kind of folks on there that are less enterprisey. I know it has the reputation of being all enterprisey, but I've seen some results that have worked.
Yeah,
So,
there's also the coaching, coaching
mhm,
speakers, authors, all those guys.
sure.
That's cool. So so how's the podcast going?
Podcast is going great. Yeah, we've been doing it. It's called Startups for the Rest of Us, and basically it's my co-host and I. We spend about 30 minutes a week, and well, that's how long the episodes are. And we basically talk about what we're doing with our businesses, and then we try to also educate on a topic. So we'll have like the ways to do customer development, or the ways to find your customers, or the way to build an email list, or the ways to survey your list, or whatever. So we try to base it on stuff that we're actively doing. It's a lot of fun. It's probably the funnest 30 minutes of my week. We spend about an hour recording it and 20 minutes outlining it, and we have a great editor. So it's fun. It's not a bunch of work. I tell people if they're going to start a podcast, like get an editor. Get someone to do all your scheduling, because then you're going to keep doing it. Because if you try to do everything, you're gonna last about 5 episodes, like most podcasts, and then you're going to fade.
Yeah, yeah. We keep refining our process here. We started off I was doing all the biz dev stuff and I was reaching out to everyone and getting so I just made a document and I have someone do that now and we do the outreach and we do the research, the editing. It just makes it easier for you so you can kind of jump into the conversations and
That's
get
right.
the most value you can because if you're doing it all, it's the same thing, man. It's just difficult to do everything at all points and every time.
Yep. Yep. And even though it won't be, the editing may not be at the exact quality that you would do it if you just spend 4 hours on it. It's like it's not worth it.
The value's still there. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah,
And
that's right.
the biggest thing is, man, you've got to like it. You've got to
Yep.
enjoy it. If you're getting away from it, I've had a lot of people reach out to me lately because we've been doing pretty good with iTunes. We just launched the podcast, and the second day was #1 on business.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
And people are like, "Oh, I'm going to start podcasting too," and this and that. I'm like, if you are expecting any kind of quick gains on this, it is
Yeah.
not. I have a year, 2 year goal out,
Yep.
for the actual podcast. I'm happy
Yep.
giving the value and things like that, but what I expect in return is not happening for a year or two.
I think that's really good advice. Yeah, it's a long, slow build, just like building a blog, except, let's say about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, when we started the podcast, it was about a 1 to 10 ratio in terms of audience. And that was from like 3 or 4 different podcasters I knew who also had successful blogs. So they had around, one person had like 10,000 RSS subscribers on their blog, and they had done their podcast for a year, and they had about 1,000 RSS subscribers on their podcast. And I was the same way. I had about, at the time, I had 7,000 RSS on my blog. We got up to about 700 within the first few months, 700 listeners, which was good. But then it's the slow build. It's like building a SaaS app, man. And it is you just show up. You need to be consistent. You need to deliver, and you need to show up every week, because those are the podcasts that build. The one I listen to 60, 70 podcasts, but so many of them are like once every 3 or 4 weeks, and it's like, yeah, I listen to them, but I'm not a diehard fan because I don't get into their story.
Yeah.
And if you come every week and deliver, and you deliver good stuff, that it's like a 1 to 2 year goal. That's a good horizon. That's when you're going to see 4 figures of listeners, unless you're blowing it up and you already have a big audience. I mean, if you're really kind of building from scratch, that's what it's going to take.
Yeah, or if so I've been looking at kind of data, iTunes doesn't really give you that much, but Libsyn gives you a little bit of data, and I've been kind of checking that data against the blog data because we're getting a lot of hits to the site and we're
Mm-hmm.
getting different hits over to iTunes. What I've noticed is the person that listens on iTunes does not go to your website, and the person that listens on your website, they do not go to iTunes. So it's kind of like it's cool because you're reaching two different audiences.
Yep.
It's a little tricky because you need to be setting up two different calls to action to go
Yep.
to, two different places. So I'm enjoying it because it kind of like makes me out just, like when you're building anything, it's kind of up to you to say, hey, what can I look at? What can I tweak? Where are things happening?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we found the same thing. We have, many thousands of listeners, and the blog traffic itself, the Startups for the Rest of Us website, doesn't get very much traffic because everybody's listening on Stitcher or on the podcast app or downloading through iTunes. And it's just, I mean, how many podcast apps have you been, or I'm sorry, podcast websites have you been to? I don't go to very many. It's pretty rare that I will click through
Yeah.
and get on the computer. So yeah, there's definitely a separate call to action. I like that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. If you're on iTunes and you're a podcast listener, you stick to it, or you stick
Yep.
to Stitcher and things like that. We're trying to, and we'll see how this goes. After I don't have enough data to actually say that it works or it doesn't, but we're kind of trying this whole content syndication strategy. My buddy Dan calls it like the echo effect, which is basically we're going Hangouts. The Hangouts go to YouTube. The YouTube gets ripped into an MP3. That's the podcast. We put it on Libsyn. It goes over to Stitcher, SoundCloud, and iTunes. And right now we're just seeing where we can get traction. But
Hmm.
as 6 months to the year, we can say, hey, this all these extra pieces gave us this much more
Hmm.
traction, and it's really just it's a big thing about just opening up new audiences.
Hmm. I agree. I think that's a good approach. I mean, a lot of the bigger podcasts, like Internet Business Mastery, does that. They send their stuff to all those places. They syndicate it, and then Pat Flynn's thing of what be everywhere, right? That's what he keeps
Yeah.
saying, and it's like it's certainly worked for him. So we haven't done the video thing at all. We've always done audio, but yeah, I could see there being benefit to it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we're switching out now to where we're doing the podcast on iTunes 5 days a week, and it's
Oh
going to
wow.
be a certain amount of interviews, and then a,
Okay.
a little bit kind of more like how you guys do it, where it's just a few actionable strategies in,
Sure.
in episodes, and then so that makes you kind of like, hey, if I'm going to listen, I'm going to be on iTunes for that, and then we're going to keep the blog special interviews like a one or two, and if you want more, you can go to iTunes. So there,
Hmm.
that way we can kind of take that call to action, but
That's
still
nice.
leave all our content marketing stuff for the people that are readers.
Right. Yeah, that's a nice way to go. If you, I don't know if you've thought about it, but also sharing part of your story could be helpful. I don't know how much you do on the podcast, but that really was a changing point for ours. We probably went the first 30, 40, there was somewhere in there, 30, 40 episodes where we kind of danced around our own stuff because it feels uncomfortable, right? To start talking about what you're doing. You're like, oh,
Yeah,
people are going to criticize me. Maybe this tactic isn't the right thing. But we just kind of started opening up slowly, and that's when things started shifting. And there was an episode in the 50s where we both told our real story, like how we quit our jobs. And that was a big kind of engagement point where I felt like people started commenting more, the audience started growing. And from then on, we felt justified or like it was the right decision to really, give an update at the beginning of almost every episode with some real stuff we're dealing with. Sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not, and during the winter it's often like hard stuff you're talking about. But yeah,
yeah.
anyways.
It's definitely like it's funny you say that because it's definitely something that I've been kind of going through and saying, what should we do? Kind of how can we capture more loyal people and kind of build this audience? And a big part of it is we're going to start kind of sharing what's going on as we grow things, right? So
Hmm.
one of the ways that we're growing things is by blog traffic, by iTunes. And so I want to talk. One of the next posts we have is how we went from zero to launch, and we got about 30,000 hits on our blog the first
Nice.
month, or how we went to iTunes and then just completely slipped, and what we feel like we did wrong, and and,
That's,
and,
yeah.
and things like that. You know what I mean? Because I think that connects. Not everyone's a badass every single second of the day.
See, that's important, right? We don't want a guru. If I listen to someone who's infallible, eventually I'm like, what are they not saying? Because we all make mistakes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And
that's
it's
cool.
cool to learn. Yeah, yeah, definitely. So what other podcasts do you listen to?
Oh man, I listen to a lot of startup podcasts, but I also listen to a lot of stuff from like NPR, like popular culture and Planet Money podcasts and This American Life and that kind of stuff to kind of go interdisciplinary. I listen to a couple economics podcasts called there's one called, was it The Hand? Something about a hand. Dang it. The Hidden Hand? Yeah, that's really helpful. There's a really good one called 99% Invisible that I'd actually recommend to most people don't know about it, and it's from NPR, but it's like a 20-minute podcast every week. It's very, very well done. So
I've seen that one.
highly
Yeah.
recommend it. Yeah. But if you're looking for in our niche, I like there's some good podcasts coming out of the bootstrapping movement. Like there's Bootstrapped with Kids, and it's a guy named Breck and Scott, and they kind of share their journeys. I mean, they share tips and stuff, but they also are sharing their story as they go along, and it's a good listen. It's entertaining. And then there's one called Bootstrapped, which is called Bootstrapped. That's again Ian Landsman and another guy, Andre, talking about their stuff. Um, yeah, those are the big ones.
Yeah.
What that I get engaged with. Tropical MBA. I don't know if you listen to Dan and Ian, but that's
Yeah,
also
I do.
it's cool to get it's similar, right? It's like you hear some of their story and then you hear some of their tips and they're helping listeners along. That's the kind of format I love. I do like interview podcasts. There are an awful lot of them, and I've had to kind of tone it down after a while because you either hear the same people or you hear the same messages from different people, right?
That's exactly why I wanted to kind of switch it out. We
Yep.
started off, and to be honest, when we first started the podcast, I could see it in the language and kind of like how I talk. I was super nervous and kind of like
Yeah.
didn't know because I was trying to figure the audio out, and then there's the video, and then
Yep.
there's me, and it just it wasn't the best thing. And then I'm looking at notes, and then I was like, you know what, this is just not going to work long term.
Yeah.
And so I decided, hey, let's just have conversations and kind of say questions that I would normally have and things like that and see where that goes. And
Right.
it's so much more natural. And you can't hear that in another podcast,
That's right. Right, because it
so
tends to be scripted and prepared in advance, and yeah,
yeah.
it's being done a lot.
Yeah, I really enjoy you guys. It's a great podcast. It's super actionable.
I
It's
appreciate
good
it.
stuff. Every time I fly, I at least have to have four. I go
Ah,
to
cool,
Yeah, yeah. So
cool.
good
That's
stuff,
awesome.
man. So let's talk a little bit about Get Drip and
Okay.
just because a lot of the people that we have as listeners and stuff like that are bootstrappers. There's also people that are trying to grow e-commerce businesses and really just online bootstrappers really
hmm
overall. So
hmm
how could they implement that SaaS into their business and kind of like get more out of it?
Yeah, I mean, so the whole premise of Drip is that it's the easiest way to start growing your list, right? So for especially for people who don't already have an email list and who know that they should have one but have never spent the time, Drip is kind of that entry level. Get in there, get an opt-in form on every page of your website with just a snippet of JavaScript, and then start building that list like on day one. And it's crazy if you've never had email subscribers. The first 5 subscribers, it's really invigorating to be like, wow, these people actually want to hear from me. It's a game changer. It's kind of like getting your first sale, right? Which
Hmm.
typically is also game changing for you.
Hmm.
So that's the original idea behind Drip, and it's set up to make it super simple. Now, what we found is that there's a lot of other tools that also make it super simple. So it's been hard to differentiate us. To people say, well, couldn't I cobble this together with Mailchimp plus this form plus this other thing? And the thing is, yeah, you can if you know what you're doing. So we've now moved into, as of today or last night, we now have marketing automation rules where you can say if someone viewed this page of your website, tag them. Like, hey, they viewed this blog post about SEO, boom, they have an SEO interest. And then later on, you can say everybody who has a tag of SEO, funnel them into this SEO course that I've just written. Or everyone who is a trial user, send them this thing. Or everyone who created a project in my app, do this thing. So that's getting a little more. I'll say it's I won't say it's complex because it's not actually complicated, but it is a little more advanced, right? You have to think through, you have to have a little more content. So I wouldn't encourage people to try to do that on day one. But for anyone who is hitting that level, and I'm finding a lot of people are,
It's a
we
totally
literally,
different audience now.
it is. It is, and thus it's kind of a marketing pivot, right? The app is
Yeah.
still similar. We've added all the rules, but we are moving into more advanced people. And the problem is we're getting a lot of advanced people signing up and looking around saying, wow, Drip is really cool. I wish it could do more, right? They like the UI, it's usable, but it's like, well, I already have MailChimp and I can kind of do some of this, or I'm going to move. The thing is there's MailChimp down here at the low end and there's Infusionsoft kind of here at the high end, right? And there's a big gap between those two. And what we found is that no one has filled that yet. And we're hoping to be that. We're hoping to be cheaper than Infusionsoft, more expensive than MailChimp, and almost as powerful as Infusionsoft in terms of the email automation.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I
So
mean, I use Infusion. I like it, but there definitely are some flaws, and for sure, it is not for everybody. It's definitely something that you've kind of have to, you've got a more legitimate moving forward business, and you know what I'm saying. So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
but yeah, I think that's a great move for you guys. That's kind of like you said. That's kind of a pivot, but at the same time, the audience that you're speaking to has the money, they
yeah,
understand the value, and they're looking for something like this. So it just really opens it up from just the guy who's kind of like, hey, I kind of want to do a little, I want to test this out and see how it works
yeah.
out. To, hey, we're looking for XYZ solutions,
Right.
and yeah, so that's awesome, man. That's really cool.
Yeah, yeah. So we're still able, at this point, we are able to serve both markets. I don't know how long. Well, we should be able to do it for the foreseeable future because we still have some, we have a whole concierge service where like people will come on and say, look, I've never had an email mini course before. I've never built a list. And if they have 5 blog posts or if they have an ebook, we will turn that into an email mini course for them at no charge, right? So that's kind of the let's help you get started thing. And so if they sign up for a trial, then we give them an extra week on the trial while we build it, and then boom, they can really get started with minimal time investment. I mean, it's like 10 minutes. They have to install some JavaScript and then wait a few days while we build their course, as long as they have some content we can work from. So I think I want to keep doing that because it's no one else is doing it, and it's a pretty valuable thing for people getting started with email.
Yeah, that's incredible. I was actually just talking to Travis Ketchum earlier on another interview on the power of content in emails and stuff like that. And we were
Hmm.
talking about how, and this would be a good potential idea for you guys just to kind of write a few things on is the power of creating kind of like a small ebook, but charging for it. Because what that
Mm-hmm.
actively does is, it changes the buyer persona from just a
Mm.
lurker to an actual buyer. And then
Yep.
once you have them in your email and onboarding sequence, the conversation is significantly different,
Right.
right?
Yep. And I'd be interested to see, I like that idea of even creating like a $9 ebook, right? A pretty inexpensive one
Yeah.
that you could throw at the front end of the subscription process of the course or at the back end, right? You could have the course lead up to that and be like, all right, I gave you some stuff. Now how about even this small purchase? And now they move on automatically to another list. They're now a customer, right? They've actually bought. But I agree, it gives you, if they've paid for it, they're so much more likely to consume it, number one, and number two, if you've given them a lot of value, then that's another step up in that relationship.
Yeah, it's just a different way. Right now, I think we live in an age where free has no value.
Yeah,
But paid and then over delivering in value,
yeah,
massive difference,
that's
massive
right.
difference.
Yeah, what if you sell them a $50 ebook for $10? An ebook that's worth $50, right? Like a really in depth, something that you spend a lot of time on, or you pay someone to spend a lot of time on, and then you just, like you said, way over deliver. That's how like that's how word of mouth gets started, right? Is when you
Yeah.
make it a no-brainer, and
Another
that's
thing you
pretty
can
cool.
do is kind of create a small webinar, but it's a paid webinar. So it's like, hey guys, this is a paid training you're going to be on. There's
Hmm.
nothing really for sale here. I'm going to show you how to gain a list of subscribers within the next 45 minutes, the ins and outs of how to do this, right? And it's $7 or $8, and I'm way worth more than $7 or $8 an hour,
Hmm.
so that's how you position it. You get some good copy in there, you teach, you over deliver, and they say, hey guys, so this is the process, and you're more than capable of doing it now. You're going to get the webinar replays. Well, if you just want to make it a little bit easier for you, you could just get drip,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
then immediately you're going to start, getting a good 15-20% of those people saying, yeah, I don't want to spend three,
Sure.
4 hours trying to learn this. I'm in, you know what I
Right.
mean? So
I
yeah,
like that.
definitely a few of those strategies I think just in general, SaaS companies need to start kind of thinking a little bit more about just getting that first acquisition rather than let's put people through this funnel for free and get millions, and then it doesn't matter. I'd rather get 100 people to give me $10 and then build that relationship than get 1,000 people and have to just segment and see what's going on and no one's listening,
Right.
and then the open rates because the engagement's not truly there.
Right. I think that's a really good idea. I'm actually making a note here about that. I haven't, so I know that webinars are working, killing it for a lot of people, right? Really doing well, but I haven't heard of anyone charging a nominal fee. I think that's a clever twist to that.
Let me know how it goes for
Yeah,
you.
totally, totally.
Cool, man. Well, Rob, I don't want to keep you. I know you've got a bunch of stuff, and I try to keep these to about 30 or so minutes. So, any final words if anyone wants to reach you, what's your Twitter handle, and what's the best
Yeah.
place to go?
Yeah, I'm at Rob Walling on Twitter, and that is a good place. I'm on there every day, a few times a day in between meetings and such. And then yeah, Startups for the Rest of Us is probably the best place for people to startupsfortherestofus.com is a good place to keep tabs on me because that's where I'm talking about what I'm doing, and we're easy to reach through there. We also have a little opt-in box there where we keep people posted via email as to what we're up to and let them know about our conferences and such. So.
Cool, cool. Awesome. And guys, we are at Startup Jungle. Reminder, as always, if you guys want to download our growth hacking guide, it is probably to the right. And if you are on iTunes, please go to startupjungle.com and leave us a review. We appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to you soon.